Welcome to ProjectME, the podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Carter, the founder of ProjectME, multimillionaire entrepreneur, former TV newscaster, money-making expert, female empowerment speaker, and self-proclaimed office supply addict. My mission is to take the mystery out of making big money. Every week on ProjectME, the podcast, I'll share success tips, strategies, and stories from other entrepreneurs, experts, and millionaires, showing you exactly how you can achieve your most exceptional life. Now let's get to it. You are listening to ProjectME with Tiffany Carter, the podcast. Today we have on Lori Kennedy, longtime entrepreneur and founder of the Wellness Business Hub, a $1 million a year revenue business. And on top of that, she's a mom of two. Hey, Lori, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Well, so excited. So the audience knows a little bit. I've been, I love following really inspirational and super raw and honest entrepreneurs. And I've followed Lori for a while. And Lori, part of why I wanted you on is my show is all about telling the real deal around starting a business, up-leveling a business, and all that good stuff. And I believe you share similar philosophy to me and what you teach your students, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even just before we sort of hit record, we had a really good, starting conversation about money.
Yeah, I mean, what we were saying is, you guys, I got interviewed yesterday for a magazine, and I said the same thing. It gives me a huge rash when I hear people say, oh, I've had my business 2 years and I have a 7-figure business. And, so I was clarifying with Lori, I wanted to make sure I wasn't misrepresenting, her business and her revenue. And, tell everyone what you said, because it was really helpful.
Well, you asked me if I could introduce you as a millionaire or using some type. And to me, that infers that I personally am a millionaire, which I am not. And then, I think even a deeper clarification when people say, I have a 7-figure business, I know that they mean revenue, because to get to a 7-figure business in profit means that you're making multiple 7 figures. And it also could mean a variety of things in terms of their, how much work they're doing. And it might not be a good way to get to, 7 figures in profit. So I just said, let's clarify. And you could say something along the lines of, my business does 7 figures in revenue, because that's the truth. Doesn't go in my pocket yet. And I think it's a huge, sort of like a mask that people put on. The gurus put the mask on. They're like, oh yeah, I have a 7-figure business, or I have a multi 7-figure. I'm like, is that also per year, or is that cumulative?
Right.
Right. So it's just, just be careful when people say to you, oh yeah, I have a 7-figure business. That could have been over the last 3 years.
That's also a great point. And, help our listeners understand, because, there's a lot of people who listen that, have a side hustle going, or they want to start a business and they haven't. So they haven't learned, a lot of this stuff yet, or maybe they've heard misinformation. What would you say in your experience as a longtime entrepreneur? What would you say roughly, percentage wise or dollar wise, what do you have to invest and spend in your business in order to generally make, Y amount of revenue per month? What have you noticed for yourself?
Well, I think it's different depending on the models. So we'll just take the online model, where there's not a lot of overhead. You're paying for a couple of different tech platforms, right? So I can tell you, give or take, to run my business, which will this year at the end of 2018 probably hit, if not over the $2 million mark, but very close to it.
Awesome.
Thank you. So from a tech platform perspective, that's going to cost me probably about $100,000. But that's just the tech platforms. So again, it depends on how many team members you have. So I am a single mom of 2. My workday ends at 3:00. I need more help than, let's say, someone who is 25, not married, with no kids, who can legit work like how I did back in the day, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week to get their business going. I literally can't do that anymore as much as I actually want to. Like, I love it. I love it. I can't, because I have these two other people that like need to go to hockey and be fed and do homework. So I think I need a little bit more support than the average person who, let's say, even like has a spouse or whatever. That's not to say that he's very much in the picture and we're 50-50 and I do have a lot of support. However, my workday still ends at 3:00, right? So I need that. So my payroll probably is, let's say, $10,000 more higher than someone else who runs the same size business as me, who can work more hours, because I just can't. I tried, it didn't go well. My kids, it didn't go well. So I was like, okay, I actually need to hire one full-time person and one part-time person to do the job I was doing. So I was doing my job that now takes me, one full-time and one part-time. But like, as the driver of the business, you're going to work harder than any of your team members. Then that never ends. So how much does it take? So from a profitability standpoint, like if you're between 30 and 40% profitability, that's really good. Most people who run online businesses, it's actually higher, which may or may not be a good thing. Like, we invest a lot of our profit back into our business. We host free events that we pay for some of our higher sort of ticket clients. We send out welcome packages for every enrollee that costs me $60 per, right? We take a lot of the profit that could go into my pocket and we put it intentionally back into the company. We also do a lot of like philanthropic things, right? So I think this year alone, I did $40,000 worth of philanthropic things.
That's awesome.
Right? That takes away from my profitability, let's say, right? So, you always aim to get the profitability higher. Right now we're running at about 35% profitability. So you can do the math. If we made $1 million, we profited 350,000, right? That went into, that's what we profited outside of payroll, outside of what I pay myself. So I pay myself, and we made that in addition to what I pay myself.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that background and the breakdown for the audience, so you guys know what that looks like. Because I teach, you do have to spend money to make money, and everyone's situation looks different. I'm getting some weird feedback on your end. Do you have your speakers up on your laptop by any chance?
I do, but I can turn it down.
Yeah.
I don't have headphones.
That's why I'm starting to hear my voice through the thing. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, I mean, I like to share these sort of, honest breakdowns with people, because it does cost money and everyone's life looks different. Like, you are still crushing it and making it happen as a single mom of two. But you're right. That looks very different than, for example, when I started my business 10 years ago. No kids, no spouse. And I was able to do, like you said, the 16, sometimes 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, right?
Yep, totally. And I even did that when my kids were little. And I find it's actually harder now. Like, I find, like, last year, my son went into grade 1 and he started more competitive hockey. My daughter was in competitive gymnastics. She was in grade 4. I found last year killed me. I wasn't ready for 2 school-age children who both had activities. Like, Monday through Thursday, I'm out of the house. We come home, we eat, we're hockey, gymnastics, whatever. I hadn't ever had that experience. And so last year really threw me for a loop, because I like it was too much. It was too much. And so I realized, okay, in order for me to have the quality of life that I want to have, in order for me to show up in a way that I'm proud of, to be the leader, to protect my own energy, because I am the most important person. Like if I'm flat, everything else around me is flat. Everything, my business, my team, my kids, my relationships, like everything. So it was a really crazy learning for me this year, because I realized like, oh man, like if we want to continue to grow, I can't stay with the current team that I have. I need to expand it. And the fallout from that was I don't know how to do that, because my background is as a nutritionist and I've only ever worked with like a team of like 3 or 4 core people. I mean, we've always had contractors, but I don't know how to run a team of 10 people.
It's a
Like
lot. That's a big up level to go from 3 to 4 to 10.
Yeah, it's a huge, I mean, that happened over the course of the year, but I think a lot of people think once you make it to whatever that level is for you, the 6 figures or $500,000 or $1 million, like the problems stop. You're like, you've made it. And I think there's actually more problems the more you make, because there's more people to handle, there's more personalities, there's much more at stake. When you're running a multi-7-figure business with thousands of clients and mouths to feed, if something goes wrong, the fallout is a lot greater than if it's just you working on your, when you're starting out, it's you and maybe one other person, right? So it's like there's more at stake almost.
So how did you figure it out, given, your background is nutrition, it's not business, how did you figure it out and find the right people to go from, your team of 3 to 4 to 10? How did you do that?
I am a huge advocate of investing in coaching. I think one of the things that has allowed me to scale quickly and do it, I don't want to say with like ease, but with a level of comfort, is I am so happy to pay people. Like I recognize that I don't know what I'm doing most of the time because I've never done this before. Like I don't know what I'm doing. I've never run a multi-7-figure business. Like, going back, listening to myself talk about profitability, like I can laugh. Like I didn't know what that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. Like I never even would have thought to even have that conversation. Right. So I recognize that in order for me to get to where I want to go, I need to invest in learning from people who have a particular skill set that is what I'm lacking. And at this current point in time, it's the ability to lead a team, to grow and scale, to do it in a way that doesn't feel like I'm being choked or drowned. Although that still kind of feels like that, if I'm being totally honest, because it's a lot. And like I said before, like at every level, there's new skills that you must acquire in order to get to the next level, if that's what you want. At every level, there's problems. At every level, there's mindset stuff and personal development stuff that you have to address if you want to stay where you are and grow. Otherwise, you're just going to sort of revert back to what's comfortable for you. And so how did I do it? I've invested in coaching all along. Like I recognize I don't know how to get to where I want to go. So I go source the people that have done it in a way that aligns with me, that I like, that's like within my personality. And that's, I don't know any other way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same thing I did to go from, multiple 6 figures to the 7-figure mark. I needed to hire somebody who was where I wanted to be, but not just in earnings, but in lifestyle, right? Because I didn't want to hire someone who was working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, who's a spaz, because if that's what it took to make that, I wasn't interested in that life.
Right. I totally agree. And I think 2 things. And this is actually what I feel like I'm lacking right now also. there's someone to go and teach you the lifestyle and the organizational and the leadership. But then there's also that, super uber obsessed marketing piece where you're marketing at scale, and it shifts your mindset. And there is a shift that has to happen where you go from, almost like one-on-one marketing to becoming this like persona, this brand. And you also have to learn that in order to get to the next level. So it's like there's these two big pieces that I had to go and learn at the same time in order to really grow the brand, grow the company. Because and some people have both of them combined. I just found for me, I went over here to learn this one thing and I went over there to learn the other from the masters of each. Because when you get to a certain level, actually, even when you start out, you really should only become a master in one thing. Like maybe you're really good at other things, but like everybody has like a super expertise in one thing that they cultivate over the years, which puts them at the top of their game.
Yeah, I agree. What made you, I'm just like trying to picture myself in your shoes, and I once was in your shoes, but I'm curious, what made you go, okay, I see what it's going to take to go to the next level? Like, when you had like that team of 3 or 4 and it was rather, rather comfortable, you're still making great money, but to go to the next level, that was a pretty damn big leap. Like, did you have to have a serious conversation to yourself? Like, is this worth it? Do I want to do this?
No, I think it all depends on what your vision for your life is. And everybody has a purpose, and we all feel this like visceral drive. I feel this visceral drive to feel a certain way, to have impact and to feel fulfilled and to push myself to like the nth degree. And so it wasn't even a choice. It was like just the next obvious step for me. Some people don't have those aspirations, which are great. Like, that's good for you. This is like, you do you, I'll do me. And for me, I need to feel like I'm constantly pushing myself. And I actually enjoy this level of development because it's something so new for me. I'd be bored otherwise, frankly. And for me, I'm learning a new skill set right now, which I haven't had to do in a while. I was like, not getting bored of my business, but like from a personal growth perspective, like I was bored of myself. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but like, I just felt like, okay, next challenge, please. Like you can't always, at least for me, I found through my seasons of growth, like, so you have a challenge and you go and you do the work and you grow and then you sort of like maintain for a while, right? And you like do the work that you just learned to like get you to that level. And then for what something happens and you realize like, oh, next challenge, and you work on that challenge and you acquire the skills or you process through some boundary or barrier or whatever. And then you like, coast for a bit because you can't, at least for me, I can't always be in personal development mode because it's freaking exhausting.
It is.
Right? So it's like I dip in and out, and I just felt like the next challenge presented itself. I could have maintained where I was for another year. I didn't have to do it, but I just felt ready to. And I think we all know when we feel ready to sort of dive into that thing that's going to hold the mirror up to your face and say, okay, where and how do you need to grow and what skills do you need to acquire in order to get to feel the feeling you want to feel, like whatever that next level is.
So for people who are ready to go to that next level, like you just described, they just know they're ready. They're ready to take on something and they know it is going to take a team. A lot of people will go, I'm a self-made millionaire. And I catch myself saying that too, because it's a very, popular marketing thing, but it's like, we're really not self-made. There's lots of people professionally and personally that help us get there, as, Lori has explained and I've explained. When you were ready, as far as your team goes, do you have any suggestions for the audience in terms of should they hire people like contract people, or do you recommend bringing people on as full-time employees of your company?
I think you need both, actually. I think that you have to look at how your business functions and your core team. Those all for me started as contractors. They are now employees. And in order for me to make them employees, I had to implement like an HR department.
Exactly.
And like all of these very adulty, very corporate things. So we only did that this year. I wasn't ready to do that before because that was like too professional and too adult and just too, I don't even know. It just felt odd to me to like have an HR department.
Well, it's also a lot of money.
It's a lot of money and you have to hire someone with that skill set. So at the beginning, everybody on my team was a contractor. They might have been, 30 hours a week, which is almost full time as a contractor. And we've evolved my core team into employees. So now we have a mix of employees and contractors and freelancers, I would say. So like a freelancer and a contractor, I think is the same thing. But in my mind, the contractors that we have are like month over month over month versus project-based stuff, which to me are more like freelancers.
Yeah, I mean, right? Like technically, like business and tax wise, they're the same. But I get what you're saying. You have a regular, almost like someone on a retainer.
Yes.
And then there's someone who does like piecemeal projects for you.
Like you would just go on Fiverr. Those are like, to me, those are freelancers. They come and go. Right?
Would you say, based on your experience, is there a certain revenue marker to reach before you really go into this land of converting contractors to employees? I'm so curious what you have to say about this. It's a tough question.
So for me, how it happened is my accountant, my like CPA said to me, you're crossing the boundary into, if you get audited, you're going to be screwed. I was like, employees it is. Like that was, because what happens is, I don't think it's necessarily a revenue thing from what I understand. And by no means am I even close to like a professional in this. But when somebody, from a contracting perspective, if they're only deriving payment from you, they're not a contractor. They have to have multiple contracts. And so if they have you as the sole payer and like they do one other gig per year, the government, I'm Canadian, so the government would look at that as like, no, they're an employee and they just like had an extra side job one time.
Oh, interesting. That's a little different than the US. Interesting.
So a contractor means that like you need to have multiple contracts and you're not dedicated to any one contract, or at least over a period of time you have to show, like you might have a contract for a year with one company, but the year before you had 5 contracts in the year, you know what I mean? Like you have to show multiple contracts. So for me, my people were contracted to me and me only for like 3 years in a row. And my accountant was like, you're making enough money now that the government could see red flags in this. So take your core people and turn them into employees, which they were actually fine with because then they didn't have to deal with paying their own taxes.
Yeah. Right? I mean, and the lesson here, you guys, whether we have a lot of people listen who live in Canada too. So I'm glad that you gave that perspective from your country. Make sure you just look into and hire an expert, a tax expert on what the laws are and the nuances with your specific country. Or if you do a shit ton of business with one other specific country, make sure you have someone who knows what the hell they're doing and be giving you that advice. I definitely want people to hear how you went from like basically, you are a nutritionist, right? And you turned your whole background more like a medical professional into a full-fledged brand. I mean, that's pretty damn inspiring. Like, how did that look? Like, can you navigate us through a little of your story?
Yeah, it happened really organically. I think some people, I still feel really uncomfortable when people like call me a business coach because I don't identify as one. I know that I am one. But it's just an odd thing for me because I worked so many years from 1999 until 2014 as a personal trainer nutritionist.
Oh, wow. I didn't know it was that long. Wow.
Yeah. So I've never had a corporate job. Like my job starting when I was 19 was as a personal trainer in 1999. And I, did training and nutrition. That's all I ever did. And so it happened really organically when I was running my nutrition practice and I changed the business model where, to my knowledge, and at that point, at least in my community, no one was running their nutrition program as a group program. Like, so this was back in 2009, 2010. And so my colleagues started to say to me, like, how are you doing this? Like versus the one-on-one model, like most service-based professionals are one-on-one. And they started to ask me, like, how are you doing this? And what are you doing? And so I just started to teach them. And
within your own niche, within your own.
Like other nutritionists were coming to me and saying, how are you doing this? What are you doing? And I remember I held my first certification with Citrix GoToWebinar, which is what it was called back then. And I took money via PayPal, no sales page. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know that it was an online anything. It was just, that was the platform someone told me to use. Like, I even think it was like my dad, he's like an engineer and he's like, this is what we use for our, meetings. Maybe this will work for you.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a thing back then.
Wasn't
like
a
it
thing.
Is now.
No, wasn't a thing. So people like wrote me checks in the mail. They dropped cash off at my door. Right? Like there was no e-transfer even. So it was like PayPal, but like very few. So like I did a lot of checks. It was very funny. And I taught a class. Like I taught an online class in I don't even know when it was, 2011. To my colleagues because I had to, because no one was explaining how to run a group program based off of a particular topic. I mean, now everybody does, like there's so many people that teach this. But that's how it happened. That's how it started because I changed the business model in my industry.
And were your group programs in-person group or were they digital
they were in person.
Group?
Nope. Okay. They were in person. And it's funny because now when I look back, like I had a full sales funnel. I just didn't know that that's what it was. I had urgency and scarcity and an ideal client and languaging and a lead magnet and the whole nine. I just didn't know that that's what it was. It just occurred to me that I should do it this way. And so because I just did it that way and I kept doing it over and over and over again, back then there was no shiny object because I didn't know what I was doing. So I made it up. And I just kept making it better and better and better that it became a funnel. And I was able to teach it to other people because I had really, what's the word? Like I had simplified it and I had processed
you refined your process.
Thank you. Yes. I refined it to such a point where I could literally teach it to other people. And so I was able to hire nutritionists under me to go and run this particular program in other locations for me so I could grow that way. And at that point, like no one in my industry was doing that.
And so for people who are listening, who are in that health space, whether you're a nutritionist, you're a personal trainer, dietitian, when you say sales funnel, what does a sales funnel look like in that specific marketplace, in that industry?
So I can tell you what it was like then, and I'll relate it to what it's like now. So back then, I used to promote a free talk. So your signature talk, your signature webinar, same thing. I used to promote a free talk and I would give people a gift for coming and they would get a recipe book. So that's the show up bonus that people use now to get people to attend webinars. And it was a recipe book. And so I would get them to RSVP on a piece of paper with their name and phone number. That's them opting in.
This is amazing. I'm
right?
loving this.
That's them opting in. And I would call them the day before to make sure that they were going to show up and remind them about their recipe book. Those are the show up emails, right? And so I would have the seminar. I'd give them the worksheet. The seminar was structured like a webinar that had a pitch at the end where I gave a discount for anyone who wanted to enroll right on the spot. And so I had contracts pre-filled out with the start date and the whole nine. So all they had to do was put their name, their phone number, and their credit card information. And I would stay after and I would run all the credit cards. And the people that didn't sign up right then and there, they were booked in for a free follow-up assessment. And I sold them via one-on-one, like a sales call, right? And I sold them more into the program that way. And then the rest of the people that didn't sign up or didn't show up, they would get follow-up phone calls.
Like actual phone calls.
Actual phone calls from me. Being like, hey, noticed you couldn't make it to the free talk. I'm having another one next week. Do you want me to sign you up for it? No. Oh, okay. Well, is this something that you want to address now? Because I have 2 spots open next week. We can do a free consultation. Like, it's the same process.
Except a lot more labor intensive because it's not automated.
It's not automated at all. And it was totally manual. But I was able to, with that process, fill all of my groups. Right? So I would have a group of 12 women, start, and I would have 3 start times every 12 weeks. Right? So I would have, I don't know, what's 12 times 3? I have no idea. But let's say 50 or 60 women running through my program at $250 a pop every 12 weeks.
Now, where did you find these people since, when you started this, the social world wasn't there. So did you just actually walk up to people?
I was in gyms. So I did free talks in gyms. I did free talks in yoga studios, and in the gym specifically. It's so funny now that I look back, direct marketing works, and direct response marketing works regardless of the medium. I remember going into all of the group fitness classes and literally handing out invitations to people to come to my free talk. So I would go in, all the morning group fitness classes had 50 women in them. And they would have an 8 o'clock, a 9 o'clock, a 10 o'clock. That's 200 leads right there. It's in my head. I'm like, everyone should just go back and do that. It's way cheaper than Facebook ads. Right. But it was, I got my face. Hello. Hi. How are you? How was your class? Good morning. Hi. How are you? How's your class? I'm having a free talk on fat loss. It was my ICA, ideal client, right in front of my face.
Yeah.
So,
and there's no reason, you guys, that you can't implement a lot of that to this very day.
It works faster and it's cheaper than online marketing, right? Especially the way algorithms are and getting in front of your ideal client. If you're just starting, and I say this to my people, you will grow your business much faster offline. You can implement the automation. You must implement the automation. You can implement a lot of the tech. But if you want to grow your business fast on the cheap, you get in front of people face to face physically.
And it's numbers. I mean, it's your qualified people, right? The great example that you gave, Lori, is, I'm also a gym rat, so I get it. But I'm thinking of Equinox, this morning, it's the prime time. Are these 8:30, 9:30 a.m. classes? They're packed. And a lot of the yoga instructors, in fact, who want to fill their retreats, they are doing this. They have these, cute little cards printed up, and they come in, or they taught the class, and Equinox lets them do a little shtick really quick at the end, and you're already in a good vibe because you just worked out, and usually you already respect that instructor, and you're like, oh, well, that's interesting. I'll take a look at that. It already is happening, but it is rule of numbers, right? If Lori just went to 1 or 2 classes, she may have only got one person at her free event, right?
Right. No, completely. And I knew that even back then. I didn't call it conversions, but I tracked it. I tracked it on a piece of paper. How many people registered, how many people showed, and how many people purchased off in that seminar. And then how many additional sales could I close in those one-on-one consultations?
I'm curious, what was your conversion with your in-person, so to speak, old school
50%.
method?
I
Oh
think
my
it was
God.
it was high because I had them, right? Like,
That's
and
incredible.
but it in person, and again too, like, remember, this was 2010. They're in the gym. They already know me. I'm there every day. They see me. The relationship already existed. Even if I was a stranger, they're in the gym that they go to. They're comfortable, right? And I'm there and I'm super passionate and they're with all their friends. And like, Russell Brunson always says, like, you need the table rush. You can't just send people on a phone to, sign up. Like, you need people to stand up and run to the back of the room because there's a psychological effect that happens, right? One person starts asking a question, everybody else feels comfortable to ask. So I think that there was, I can sell. Like, I'm not afraid to sell either, right? And I was really confident in the program. Plus there was like social proof plastered all around the room. And like, I had all the elements. So I was able to close, I would say 40 to 50% of the women. I mean, again, the offer matched the desire. They were there because they wanted to lose weight.
True.
And it was a fat loss seminar.
True. But I still have to commend you because the average in the industry that I would say is considered excellent job is a 10% conversion rate.
I think that's different now. And I think that's off a webinar. I think conversions are always higher when they're in person.
This is great. This is great advice because I think a lot of people feel more safe to hide behind the screen and automation because truly it is less work than taking yourself physically. And then, some people are uncomfortable with that. You happen to be comfortable with selling. I'm comfortable with selling too. Most people are not. Now you're in person. You are using a lot more of your time and energy versus pressing buttons on your computer. However, it sounds like in your specific industry, the payoff is much higher.
Oh, for sure. I don't know what the average close rate is. It's definitely different from in person than on webinar. I think in multiple industries. Like, I know this to be true when you're doing like a conversion talk, let's say from like a trade show or a conference. I think the average close rate is like 30%. Like, I think that if you're in person, because they can feel you, unless you're just not good at selling, I know that to be true of my events also. When we do live events, like our close rate is like 30-35%.
Yeah. I mean, I really appreciate your transparency here and in taking us like on the throwback ride, because there is a lesson, you guys. Just because something was done a certain way, a decade or more ago, that doesn't mean it doesn't work. In fact, that way worked for centuries.
Yeah. I mean, people can, come up with whatever fancy, hooky names they want for it. But at the end of the day, the formula is the same. We're all doing the same thing. We've just added our own personality into it, right? It's direct response marketing. Like, there's nuances to it for sure. And some things work better for others and different industries. But at the end of the day, like, there's steps and everybody follows the steps.
How can people who are hearing this and feel really comfortable with your style and want to learn more about your process? Because I love how you integrate, old school with new school. It's kind of like they say Eastern, Western medicine. You do the old school, new school. It's very cool. You guys, that's not actually really being done out there. That's a really cool approach. How can people get in touch with you or someone on your team to perhaps work with you or attend some of your free sessions that you might have?
Sure. So I think the easiest way, if you want to get in touch with me, is to just go to Instagram. So it's at Lori Kennedy Inc. and Lori is Lori. So it's at Lori Kennedy Inc. And then the other way is we have a free Facebook group. So it's called Take Your Health Practice Online. You can go and request to join the free Facebook group. And then if you want to find out more, you can just go to the wellnessbusinesshub.com, and all the programs are there and everything that we offer is on that site.
And you're currently running something that's free for people, if I recall, aren't you? Don't you have something
we
free?
do challenges all the time. So last month we did a challenge all around how to create your signature program, like your group program. Next month we're doing one on email list growth. So we do challenges all the time. I do tons of like Facebook Lives and all of the stuff. So if you're in the Take Your Health Practice online Facebook group, you'll see all of it. Also, if you jump over to Instagram, like you'll see what we're constantly doing. So there's different things that we do depending on what you need to work on in your business.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure you guys, all of this is in the show notes. And if you're too lazy to go to the show notes, you can always go to my Instagram, ProjectME with Tiffany. And if you've forgotten, but you can also just kind of rewind a little because Lori just told you her Instagram and all the links. So thank you so much for sharing your entrepreneurial journey and your wisdom. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you. This was awesome. Thank you so much.
And you guys want to announce that you can now listen to ProjectME with Tiffany Carter on Spotify in addition to all the other things. So go ahead, give it a listen, and let Lori and I know like any questions or comments or feedback on the episode. I know that both Lori and myself would love to answer any questions that you guys have, and don't be shy to do that because that's how you learn. Thanks so much. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.